Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 2. This week, we turn to a fresh author, Ambrose Bierce. Now, I really like Bierce, and I think he's underrated and underread today. Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge is still regularly included in anthologies, but it is, practically speaking, pretty much the sole thing that you will usually ever run across from him. During his lifetime, he wrote over 3,000 pieces, and his collected works, which he put together and selected, it only is made up of the things that he really liked. His collected works run to 12 volumes. His writing career spanned over 40 years. One thing that detracts from his literary achievement is that he never wrote a novel. In the 19th century, the novel really was considered the pinnacle of expression. It was the way that they thought culture expressed itself. And I mean that literally. Theorists at the time talked about how medieval culture had built cathedrals as an expression of their beliefs and who they were. And they thought that 19th century culture wrote novels to do the same thing. And they were serious in this comparison. Just as tourists still go to Europe to look at cathedrals, they thought people would look back at them and know them and who they were by reading. So coincidentally, that's what we're doing. So Bierce not writing novels said to a lot of people during his time that despite him writing, that he was still really kind of a dabbler, more of a commentator, not a serious artist. So I want to make just a couple of points about Bierce and his writing. First and foremost, Bierce is not really a realist author. All right, so we are heading there, but we are still on the road. We're not there yet. He does use elements that connect to realism, and that helps us on our way. However, Bierce would have been the first to be offended if anyone suggested that he was only part of a larger movement. So far as he was concerned, he was a one-off, an original, someone who set the pace for others. He did write about the Civil War, but he also wrote early science fiction, gothic horror, run-of-the-mill ghost stories, political and social parody, and some absolutely outrageous dark comedy. For that, I'm going to recommend that everyone, whenever you've got the time, take a look at a story of his called Oil of Dog. It's about a family that makes its living crafting homeopathic cures by boiling down unwanted babies and then passing that off as an okay thing by telling them that it's only unwanted puppies. All right. So yeah, some of his writing is really something. Even though Bierce is not himself a realist, this does give us room to explore what I started talking about in my announcements last week. If Bierce can describe a scene or an event and allow us to imagine ourselves there, that is something a realist would also value. So we need to start thinking in terms of what, beyond representing the real, is needed to make an actual realist. The two stories we're reading from Bierce rely heavily on the expectations of the reader. As the overview for this module suggests, we are looking for elements of the romantic in these readings. And for that, again, I'm going to refer you back to my announcement last week about Hawthorne and what he said he was doing in writing romance and how he differentiated it. Remember how he talked about how there's a certain latitude for what for the expectations for what can be done in such a story, as opposed to one that is strictly related to what actually happens in people's lives. Now, if you know, again, in that preface, he was referring to the House of Seven Gables. And if you think about what happens in the House of Seven Gables, again, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it really is pretty realistic. It's just, meaning it's just about a guy who comes home after having been in prison, and he's been wrongly convicted of something, but the stigma still hangs around him. And it's, him getting over it and finding out the truth of what happened. All right. It's a story that might be the plot for, a standard, Netflix movie these days. So it's all in how Hawthorne approaches the subject and deals with it and builds this sort of tone and feeling into what he's doing that makes it deviate from representing just straight out reality. All right. So sorry, I lost my train there. So back to Bierce. So as I said before, the romantic didn't just fade away. So we're going to look for romantic in these readings. What we can see Bierce doing in both cases, in both stories, is him displaying an understanding that his audience will take what he is saying in a certain way and using this to his advantage, creating a really impactful ending for his stories. Essentially, what he's going to do is he's going to play upon people's expectations about the romantic, and then he's going to yank the romantic carpet out from under their feet at the ending. All right. So that's what's going on. For our purposes, what we need to think about is that if Bierce could count on this effect, it means that he understood that the romantic view would be the natural one for his readers to take. And this tells us that romance was still a big influence on the public at this time. All right, I made a promise to keep these notes short, so I'll restrain myself. But Bierce is one of those guys who's probably as interesting as a person as he was as a writer. So I'd like to go on and on for a while, but I won't. Just in brief, like other literary people of the day, he started working as a printer during his teen years, and that's what enabled his, that's what set up his ability to go on and become a writer. However, at the age of 18, the Civil War began, and he immediately volunteered, and he served in the Union Army until 1864, when he got a head wound at Kennesaw Mountain in Georgia. And that ended that career. He had risen from private as a volunteer to lieutenant on the staff of his commanding general. All right. Repeatedly, over the next 10 years, he tried to re-enter military service because he really sincerely thought that's what he was best suited to do in his life. He was not accepted. That head wound resulted in him occasionally just blacking out every now and then. So not exactly what most people would think is, fit for service, but regardless, he kept trying. But what that meant was it left writing and publishing as a fallback for him. And so you can see that you might even just say, use this as the central disappointment in his life that he didn't get to be the soldier that he wanted to be. And so it inspired the bitterness that we see in everything that goes on. All right. That's a very simple way of looking at it. That writing career lasted, as I said, over 40 years. It was fiery. He was unforgiving in his writing and regularly, frankly, vicious when he wrote about people. When he thought he was right about something, he pulled no punches. As a man of 72, in the early years of the 20th century, he took a train south out of Texas to go do what he said was he was going to report on the revolutions that were going on in Mexico at the time. There was open warfare with rebel factions trying to overthrow the government. He went down to report on it, and he was never seen again. That's it. That's the end of his story. So he was really something. Very much of his writing was really something. So as I say, I think he's really worth taking a look at as a writer. And he's really interesting for our purposes in getting us towards thinking about, what really makes realism, and again, the state of Romanticism here in the second half of the 19th century as well. All right. So as usual, I'm posting stuff on your work for the week. If you have questions on it, make sure to get back with me. If you need anything other than that, you know how to contact me, please do. Until next week, adios to everyone.